So I've got my good friend Jason Gore on the podcast today, and he is, the jack of all trades. Played the tour, went and worked for the USGA, now works for the PGA Tour. But tell us where you are today, because this is kind of interesting too. Because this subject today is about the 2005 U.S. Open, which I think a lot of people are going to be interested in. They won't know this story. It's kind of a tin cup type story, but where are you today? Because I know you just turned 50.
I am in Madison, Wisconsin, making my Champions Tour debut at the American Family Insurance Championship. I got a sponsor exemption late Monday and kind of had to make a last-minute audible. I was supposed to be at Memorial. I was at Memorial and then got a call from Nate Pockris, who's the tournament director here, and he's like, we got a spot back. Do you want to play? And I'm like, he just attended all the Grayson Murray memorials and just I was in a place where I'm like, when do you need to know? And he goes, in 9 minutes. And I'm going, okay, I need, give me 3. I'll get you an answer. I called my wife real quick and I'm like, what do you think I should do? She goes, are you ready? And I'm like, no. She goes,
no, not
then
ready.
You should go. But
what's the definition of ready? Honestly, give me where are you on your game? You're kind of like anyone that works, and now you're getting called into a pro tournament. Although you are a pro and you're a great player and you've won a bunch of tournaments, but where are you in your game? What can we expect now that everybody's going to watch this? What are we going to see from you this week?
I don't know, but I'm really, really, really trying hard right now to change this like this self-deprecating attitude I've got, but I don't want to be like, I want to try to, like, today we got one more practice session today, and I want to like find the good, right? Like I went through my round yesterday and I felt like I just played like absolute garbage, and it was really close to being 6 or 7 under par, right? Like, I mean, like out here, I now that I'm a rookie again, I'm somewhat long. This golf course is set up to where I can carry bunkers and can reach almost every par 5. There's one that's 600 yards, which I'm super disappointed that the Champions Tour is a 600-yard par 5. But I always thought we were moving up a tee box, right? But I had 7-iron into a par 5 and I missed it and missed in a bunker, didn't get up and down. But like if you go back and look at it, like, hey, in a tournament, I'm probably going to be okay. Like, it's like you're playing with a pro-am and they're 4 great guys. But it can keep going. It can linger. Right. So today I'm going to try to find the good stuff and not just be like yeah, man, I hope I'm low golf administrator this week. Just I'm the only golf administrator here this week, but I'm going to try to go out.
You'll be fine. I told you yesterday that after the second hole, all the nerves will be out, and it's like playing in a pro-am with your buddies. These guys are all 50 plus, some are 60 plus, so you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Do you know your pairing yet? Did you get Rocco or someone?
No, I got Boo Weekly and Mario Tiziani, and Boo is great, and Mario is he's a great player. He's Strick's brother-in-law, Steve Stricker's brother-in-law, and doing very well in the Champion Tour. But I've got Jay Green on my bag this week, who caddied for Grayson. So
Grayson Murray there was a tragic story that happened to him at Colonial. It was it really hit me hard. I was up in New Mexico, and when I heard the news, I was on the golf course, and I got a text from a couple of tour players, and they told me about Grayson Murray, and I kind of followed that story, and I really remember when he won in Hawaii, and I took this quote that he wrote, and I gave it to my wife, and I sent it around, which the quote was, the greatest gift that I could ever give to my parents was that they could go to bed at night and know that when they woke up the next day, I'd still be here. And I just, that quote, I still have it right here. And, I've had some of this in my family over the years, some of this type of, depression, addiction stuff, and been through some of this, but it really hit me hard, man. That guy just proves to you that no matter how good your life is and how good everything seems to be going, there's other things that are controlling you more.
Yeah, it's a sad situation. Like you just said, after Hawaii, Grayson he was a complex guy, let's just say, and but he was well liked, he was well respected, and everybody knew how good his golf game was. And as professional golfers, we put so much emphasis on, well, if you're playing well, then you're a good person, right? Or if you're playing well, then you have a louder voice. And we're out there practicing and be like, what, life would be just great if I can make one more 10-footer, but I mean, this guy had won 3 times in the last calendar year, twice on the Corn Ferry Tour and once on the PGA Tour, and was playing great. And I mean, it just goes to show you that like there's more to life than golf, and you never know what somebody's going through. And I think Harry Higgs, during his acceptance speech when he won the same week in Knoxville on the Corn Ferry Tour, was, hey man, we just need to be kind to each other. Say something kind to somebody you love, and say something kind to somebody you don't even know. And the world needs a lot of that right now.
I walked 9 holes the other day with Pat Perez, who's in town, who you and I are close friends with, who lost his brother earlier last year. And I walked with Anthony Kim, who's back on the Live Tour now. I went and walked 9 holes with those guys. And Anthony Kim, he's had similar things happen to him. And, he'd be the first to tell you that's all self-imposed. Well, I guess everything's self-imposed. But it's nice to see him now with his little daughter. And now he's focusing on himself and trying to get better. And his attitude was amazing the other day. I got to Terry, who my producer is on this very call. We were in Hollywood doing a commercial for Buick about, I don't know, was when Anthony Kim was about 10 years old, and he was hitting balls. It was 10 o'clock at night, and there was this little 10-year-old kid hitting balls next to us that was incredible looking swing and all that. And he and I went over there, and I gave Anthony a few little tips. I didn't know it was Anthony Kim, and about 10 years later or 15 years later on tour, I got paired with him. He said, hey, do you remember me? It was in San Antonio. I said, no. He goes, I was the kid you gave a lesson to in Hollywood, 15 years ago. Just got out of Oklahoma, and we're playing the last round. He shot about 64 that day. And as you know, AK was one of the sort of, his run wasn't that long, but it was like lightning when he played the tour. He would take off and it would just like a bolt of lightning. And I'm telling you, his game is coming back pretty quick. Don't be surprised to see him play some good golf coming up. But at any rate, we are going to go back in time here to 2005 to the U.S. Open. And the reason I wanted to bring you on is it's back at Pinehurst #2. And before I kind of reveal everything that happened to you in 2005, because this is a story that's worth hearing. How did you get you were on Nationwide at that time. How did you get in? How did you qualify? Because there's a lot of stories out now. It's very popular to hear these stories about guys qualifying that have never played a major, so on and so forth. Tell us how you got to Pinehurst #2 in 2005 first.
So I was in Chattanooga playing in a Nationwide event, which is now the Corn Ferry Tour. And I had qualifying and sectional qualifying at the time, now finals, whatever we want to call it, but was at East Lake. And so went down and played East Lake in Atlanta, and had, June in Atlanta, it was 10 degrees hotter than the surface of the sun. And of course there was afternoon thunderstorms and all this stuff. So I was playing okay. I was, probably somewhere just outside of the mix. And I was going to leave. And my caddy at the time, Lewis Poehler, who's still a very, very close friend, I'm like, dude, let's just go up to Chattanooga. Like, let's go get a practice round. And he's like, no, man, you could still do this. And I'm like, all right. So we came back, and I think, if my memory serves me correctly, we birdied 6 out of the last 7 holes to get in. So, and it could be 4 out of the last 6. It could be 5, whatever it was. I went on this like stupid good run to qualify, and I ended up finishing, I think it was tied for medalist or maybe second place. I don't remember. It was all kind of a whirlwind, but yeah, came back and just lit up my last few holes to qualify for the U.S. Open, and then went to Chicago. And James O, this is a great part of the story that doesn't often get told, but James O took my truck. I had a black Expedition at the time, and it was all done up. It had the navigation and the TV screens in the back, because I thought our 8-month-old had to have a TV screen, but little did I know he sat backwards in the car seat. But so James O took the car from Chattanooga to Knoxville. And my wife and I flew up to Chicago to play in, I think it was the Simmons Bank or whatever it was called at that time on the nationwide tour. And so on Sunday night, we flew back after the tournament. I think I played okay. I probably finished 15th, 18th. I don't know. It was a long time ago. But I remember playing pretty decently. So we flew back to Knoxville and we started to drive over to Pinehurst. And when in the middle of our drive, it started to downpour. It was 2 a.m. We had an 8-month-old in the back seat. And so we stopped at a hotel in Asheville, North Carolina. And my wife got out of the car, it was just dumping down rain. The North Carolina, a red cell thunderstorm. So I pulled under the into the lobby right there, let her out, and she goes, "I'll take Jax, I'll check in, just take whatever you need." I said, "What do you need?" She goes, "Nothing, I'm fine. I'll get it in the morning." So I went in, I grabbed my suitcase. Now, in the meantime, Lewis, my caddy, had taken my clubs and all my golf stuff. He's like, "You don't want to travel with this. He was driving down. I'll take it." So yada, yada. So she goes out in the morning. I'm still sound asleep. It's probably like 7 a.m. and we're going to drive over to Pinehurst. Well, she goes out to the car and the car is completely empty. So
Gone.
everything, the car was there, but everything inside of it was gone. My backpack, my computer, my everything, like, just gone. All of her clothes gone. The stereo, everything was ripped out. We had no air conditioning. I guess they popped the keyhole out, and but the thief had a heart because he left the car seat. Apparently, didn't need it.
Oh,
So we had
couldn't
to go.
sell it to anyone, probably.
Probably, yeah. So we had to end up going to Target. And at this point, we didn't have a pot or a window, right? Like, I mean, we were scraping pennies together, just trying to live my dream. And so we went to Target. And this was, 4 years after 9/11. They took my backpack, which had my credential, which had my parking pass, which had everything. So we pull up in this black Expedition, and it's got I tinted the heck out of the windows, and right. And so, like, I
You
pull
look
up.
like you look like you're coming in like from where you're really coming in from Tin Cup here
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
and so I roll down the windows, and there's this officer there. And meanwhile, Ralph Cross, my agent, had already called and said, like, this happened, and so they're on the lookout for me. But I roll down my window, and I've got wires hanging out of my dash, no air conditioning. I've got the window cracked like this much because Jackson's got a double ear infection, and this guy, like, immediately almost like ripped his gun out on me. I'm like, "Dude, like, listen, hey, this is the story." He's like, "All right," and he radios and he's like, "Okay, yeah, we got you coming." And then the USGA was awesome. They came out, they gave me parking pass and courtesy car, all that stuff. But so we got there, played 9 holes, and that was my trip to Pinehurst. That's how the week
That was
started.
that was how you started. Before we get into the first two rounds of this tournament, what was your first impressions of Pinehurst? Number two, you obviously worked for the USGA prior to your new job at the PGA Tour, so you know all about the USGA now. What was your first impressions of Pinehurst?
Uh, um, I think my first impressions, I had played in a few US Opens before that, but the bigness of Pinehurst, right? Like, it was the pains, the aura of Payne Stewart still being there, the walking by and seeing the statue of him, and just knowing, like, I'm kind of like a golf historian nut. Like, I love walking golf courses where I know cool stuff has happened, right? Like I love walking Pebble Beach. Like, I think I would, if it was between Cypress Point and Pebble Beach, like, I think Cypress Point is amazing, but Pebble Beach has where all the cool stuff has happened, right? Like, so, um, just having that feeling of like the bigness of the championship of the US Open, and knowing that I was playing Corn Ferry Nationwide, whatever you want to call it, but just having that feeling of like the largeness and how important it was, and it's and knowing that there's the US Open is a place where it defines players' careers, and not you or Tiger Woods or anything like that, but like, there's been lots of players that that define themselves. It's like, oh, hey, here's Joe Smith. He played in the 2002 US Open, and be like, oh my gosh, this guy's played in the US Open, right? Like, so it defines any, meanwhile, hasn't even won the club championship. So it
Yeah.
defines players' careers. So um that's the one thing that blows me away, especially now on both sides, is the bigness of the championship. But I think my impressions of Pinehurst was just hard, right? Like, I mean, you hear the stories, and you hear Dave Pell says that only 20 something percent of the greens at Pinehurst are hittable from the fairway, right? So, there's just all of this. And
It's
I
like Ben Crenshaw said in a thing I read recently, was you don't count how many greens you hit at Pinehurst in regulation. You count how many you visited.
right. And Seminole's the same
You
way,
were
right?
there for a second, right?
Yeah, how many greens you visit today? But like, I think the one thing that Lewis really did a great job on, we both did, was just hitting it in spots where you could putt from. And whether that's because there's places where you can putt from anywhere around there, but doesn't mean you got a chance to get it up and down, right? But I remember
Yeah.
standing at
For those that don't know, these are the ultimate turtle back greens, right? Every hole has a giant runoff that's just gross. What can happen to your ball? It's just laughable what can happen almost on every hole at Pinehurst. You can get a laughable situation, right?
Yeah, it's not just one area, it's all four areas, right? I mean, it just everywhere it just falls off. But there was a shot I remember on number 8. I think it was on Saturday where I hit this, or Friday, where I hit this bomb down the left side, and it's perfect. And I've got 70 something yards, and he's giving me a target 45 feet right of the hole
Yeah.
and short, right? So I'm hitting a 50-yard shot 40 feet right of the hole from 70 yards. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then you get up there and you see this pin was back left, and it's,
Drop off.
oh, just to the ninth green, basically, right? Which is a par 3. But it's like, okay, like, I guess I'm going to have a 40-footer here with lob wedge in my hand, and hit a great
That's
shot.
where famously John Daly snapped right on the back of the 8th green, remember? And he was putting off the back, couldn't get it up, and then he walked up and hit it while I was on the run, right? That was the 8th hole. That's probably the hardest hole out there. But
yeah.
So you go to Pinehurst, you barely qualified, or you got hot at the end of the qualifying, went to Chicago, did all that, got robbed, showed up, and now you shoot 71, 67 in the second round. You are actually near the lead in the US Open. And that hole you just talked about, number 8, I remember seeing you on TV. I'd met you once or twice before through a couple of other mutual friends, but I got this big guy on the TV that is hitting it a mile. I don't know if you were playing with a Cobra driver back then or whatever, and your smile is bigger than you, and you look like you're having a ball. Take me to, now you are in the US Open for real. Take me to Saturday morning. You are in the final 2 groups going off in the US Open near the lead on Saturday. Put us on the tee with you Saturday, and what's happening with the baby and everything.
So, I mean, the tee times there, I think we teed off at like 3:00 or something like that, right?
It's brutal. It's brutal.
So the golf, you can't wait to the golf. It's the waiting of the morning. And I don't know how many the viewers or listeners out there remember the Sony Trio phone. Remember that? It was like a LCD screen. It was like the first BlackBerry, and I had one of those, and it broke. Right. So I couldn't receive any kind of messages or anything like that. And like the screen was just cracked, which turned out to be the greatest thing that ever happened.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the best thing that happened to you.
Yeah, it was awesome. Like, I had no phone, I had nothing. And Pinehurst is a sleepy little town, right? And so by the time you're done on Friday, like there's nothing's open. And Saturday, like I remember going downstairs, we stayed at Pine Needles and went downstairs to have breakfast. And all of a sudden I went from like who's that guy? I went from who's he to who's who. And went down there and had breakfast and kind of you could start to hear everybody like point and whisper and like I'm just with my wife and sick baby and it was incredible. Like
Where was
you had
your
to find
game?
time.
Where was your swing at that point? Where were you? Did you have something going? Did you envision yourself going out Saturday and doing well, or were you like petrified, or were you like, hey, I'm just going to see what happens? Where were you mentally? Because a lot of people don't realize, what tour players are thinking about, right?
I think
We
all
know
of
what
it,
Tiger. We know
right?
what Tiger was. He was right there with you. We know what he was thinking, but we want to know what you were thinking.
Yeah, I think all of it. I think, I was scared to death. I was excited. I couldn't wait to do it. This is everything like I had ever dreamed of doing, and now it's happening. And it's like, you had to constantly remind yourself, like, hey man, this is why you practice. This is why you've stayed up, and these are the 5 footers you hit in the dark as a 10-year-old or 12-year-old, and say like, yeah, I get to make this to win the US Open. And so like you had to like channel all of the anxiety and recognize it, throw it out, get the excitement, recognize it, throw it out, and then just try to be like, all right, like I got to hit my first tee shot. And that's the only thing I have control over right now. And as soon as it leaves the club face, I don't even have control of it over that. So you go and you try to execute the best you can. You prepare yourself to make the best golf swing you can to hit the shot that you're trying to imagine. And then a centimeter off the club face, you may as well bought a ticket. Right. So you can only control what you can control. And like you just try to prep yourself and be ready and try to execute the best you can. And I think that's
But
what I
you were a long hitter. You were a long hitter that came onto our tour. You weren't John Daly long, but you were long. You were as long as any other player that week. And were you going for length that week, or you were swinging well? You're a big guy. Sometimes you're not as loose as you want to be, but that week you were loose and you were ripping it.
well, I led the tour in total driving. I think a couple times. Like I drove it really, really well, and like, but I always have done that, right? Like that's been my thing. I just happened to be. I switched to a new driver. I was hitting a TaylorMade R7, and it was the first time ever that I recognized low spin, right? Like I was hitting a Titleist and it was kind of spinning, and I hit it straight, and all of a sudden I got this TaylorMade that I'm like, gosh dang, this thing looks like flatter. It just kind of like gets out there and it doesn't like do the step, and I'm like,
Yeah, you're the highest hitter ever. So with
yeah,
no spin, you're hitting miles at
yeah,
Pinehurst.
and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like, and I had the driver for a while, right? Like, I mean, it wasn't like it was just, I just never hit it. And finally, I played a practice round with Fred Couples because we had, the same agent basically, and our agents were partners, and I'm getting out there, and I'm, Fred freaking Couples, right? Like, and I'm hitting it 30, 40, 50 by him, and I'm like, oh crap, like, like this is
That's
awesome.
going to give you some. That had to give you some confidence, right?
Yeah,
Right out the gate.
and I didn't realize I was a good driver of the golf ball. He's like, dude, you're one of the best drivers of the golf ball I've ever seen. And I'm like, what? Like, it's so like it just all of a sudden, like all these pieces started to come together. And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of a BMF, right? I'm kind of a bad mofo, right? Like you just start to believe in yourself and things start happening. And I started putting well, and I chipped in on Friday from a place that I had no business even getting up and down from, right? And it just hit the shot and went up there and trickled in like it was like 5 footer, and like so all of a sudden like these parts started to come together, and I'm like, all right, like I could do this. And I started to play with these guys who hit bad shots, right? Like as a tour player, it's managing, I call it managing the failures, right? Like because everybody hits bad shots, but you only watch on TV. And I've been on tour, and like I and the problem was the first few times I'd been on tour, I'd never played with the best, with the greats. Like you and I didn't play many practice rounds, but like I played with Fred, and then I played with a couple guys, and like I knew that I could beat the guys I was playing with. I just didn't know I could even compete with you, right? Like so once I saw that and I saw like, oh my gosh, Fred hit a bad shot. He's human. Like, you just think that you guys hit it 3 feet every time. But so I started to like go like, okay, like they do what I do. And this guy thinks I do this better than what I always looked up to him. So there was just parts that started to come together and I started to really believe in myself and good things happened. And like by the time Saturday rolled around, I'm like, well, son of a bitch, let's go. Let's go have some fun.
Yeah, well, on Saturday, you took the outright lead in the U.S. Open in 2005. Tiger Woods is behind you. Michael Campbell, the ultimate winner to the tournament. Retief Goosen, two-time champion. All these guys are stacked up behind you, Jason Gore. Were you conscious that you took the lead on the back nine on Saturday?
I don't think so. Like at that point, Retief was the man, right? Tiger was always the man, right? But like Retief was the defending champion, and all of a sudden, like the crowd started to get behind Retief, and then they're like, "Oh no, we're going to get behind this guy. They're going to get behind this guy. It looks like he's he's going to sit down at the pub tonight and have 18
Oh
beers."
yeah, you became the instant crowd favorite. I mean, it had all of us in the locker room just watching to see what Jason Gore was going to do, because you were the outlier. You weren't supposed to be where you were in this position, and we all want to see and we all want to hear what was happening, right? We want to see what happens.
Yeah, I wasn't supposed to be there, right?
Well,
It wasn't
you
fitting
earned
the
your way,
narrative.
and you knew you earned your way, and you've already discussed about the things that you were good at, but we still, as tour players, want to see the guy, the underdog guy, go. We just want to see what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, and I was having a great time, right? The crowd kind of got behind me, and so I'll go back to my practice round with Fred, and like I was a nobody. I was basically the guy that was going to leave Friday afternoon. The guy's playing with Fred, like, oh, that's nice of Fred. He's giving me a little tap on the head. Everybody yelled, Freddie, Freddie, Fred. I go, does that ever get old? And he looked at me and he goes, not really, no. And all of a sudden, I became that guy where everybody's yelling, Jason, Jason, like, and it was swelling, and it was just feeding the already massive egos that us tour players have. But um, it was it was really cool just to like look back and say, to have that conversation with Fred, and now it was happening to me in like, you know, 60 hours. 60 hours earlier asking that question. And now it's like, but it was, I think I really, really fed off those fans at Pinehurst, and they were amazing. And like, I'll probably get one or two texts a week of friends that go to Pinehurst and send me a video, because if you immediately you turn on the TV at Pinehurst and I'm there, right? They go through
Yeah.
like every US Open that's been
Yeah.
conducted there, and they're like, dude, I can't get away from you. I'm like, I'm always watching, man. I'm always there to haunt you.
So you get in the clubhouse with a 72. So you open with 60, 71, 67, 72. And now I think you're like 3 shots back of Goose, I think, going to the last round. And it doesn't almost matter that you shot super high on Sunday, but we're going to go through it anyway, because he did too. Goosen did too. He shot about the same as you did on Sunday. But now put us into the position, put us back onto the tee now for Sunday. Where are we mentally now? We had the crowd, but that settles down overnight, as you know, and you've got to actually sleep, and you've got to rest, and you've got to get yourself back up, ready to go on Sunday. And it's a long stretch. Everything's tough about the U.S. Open. Maybe not for Tiger. Maybe not. It certainly was tough for me. I shot 79 on that Saturday. I shot 74, 69, 79, shot 70 on Sunday. But tell us about Sunday, because the nightmare happened on Sunday that that's why we're talking about it. But and then I want to ask you, what would you have done different? But let's put everybody on the tee on Sunday.
So Lewis and I always had a routine where we'd go wedge early, right? So we'd go take 3 clubs out to the range, kind of dial in my wedges a little bit, go in, have lunch. And this was for any afternoon tee time. Go in, have lunch, take a little break, and then come back out and warm up, right? That was just kind of like our routine to try to like eat up the morning, right? If you had a 1 or 2 o'clock tee time, we would meet at 10, do our thing. So we did that. And of course, NBC or whoever was doing pre-coverage are like, oh my gosh, he must be nervous. Like he's out here 5 hours early. I'm like, no, that's what I did, right? Like so kind of did that, but it was different. Now you had people watching you on the range. Now you had people, you know, asking for autographs on the way back to the thing. So it kind of got me
Heats
out
up
of
a lot
there.
of energy.
It
Chews up
does,
a lot of energy too.
but that was what I did. So I got to the tee and
Are you playing with Goosen?
I'm
Yeah,
playing with Goosen. So I birdied the final hole on Saturday to get into the final group.
yeah,
And I birdied 18. And Ron Reed, who was the starter for the US
yeah.
Open, wrote in a book about the 2005 US Open, and he signed it on the inside. And it says, to the recipient of the loudest ovation I've ever heard on the first tee at the US Open. And he goes, and it was when they announced my name, I remember looking up and they have these grandstands down the left, and everybody stood up and started screaming. And it was like, it was kind of startling, right? Like I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what's going on here? And
You were the new hometown favorite.
I was the Prince of Pinehurst. So somehow I don't know how that came about, but that's what I was. That's the name I was given. And I walk up and I freaking smash it down the first tip fairway, all the way down there. I think I had like flip pitching wedge. I think I had 120 something in there to that hole, and it was like 4.7. It was a monster of a hole. And I think I outdrove Goose and by like 30 or 40 yards, and like, but he kind of necked one. I'm not going to say it, but he was down on the right side of the fairway. And as I'm walking off the tee, everybody was screaming my name. I actually kind of felt bad. Here's for Retief, like here's the defending US Open champion. He's got a 3-shot lead, and it felt like nobody gave one flying you know what about him. And I actually kind of felt bad. Like I had to like calm the crowd down after I smashed it down the middle because I was first up, to like be respectful and have him hit the tee, have him hit his tee shot. And but yeah, I hit a great shot into one. I hit a bad drive on two. I hit it right and got up and down from nowhere to make bogey. And then on three, I it's just an iron off the tee, and I had this little pitching wedge. And I don't know if the wind died. The pin was back left, and this green's it's typical Piners. It's
Yeah,
all up in place. And I hit it on the perfect line and flew it about 3 or 4 yards too far and made six.
yeah,
And hadn't hit a
yeah.
bad shot, right? So like that's what Piners does. And then I think the one thing I got out of both Lewis and I'll take most of the blame because I think I'm president of on-course operations, Caddy's vice president of on-course operations, was that we tried to go win the US Open,
You were
right?
trying to win it on hole three. Is that what
I was trying to win it after hole three. Like, like
after?
I changed my lines to a little bit tighter, a little bit more aggressive. And you just can't do that at that place, right? Like
Going back to 30 minutes ago when you were talking about on hole eight, where Lewis told you to hit it 30 or 40 feet to the right. That year, my dad was there, and on Saturday he came up to me and he came over to me on one of the holes. It's relevant to this story. He said, "Are you going to bogey every hole today out here? Because I can do this." He was joking, and I said, "Dad," I told him later, we were having a beer later, and I said, when you're in contention at the US Open, it's easy to hit it 40 feet to the right or left of the pin because you're looking to make four or a par. But when you're over par and you're trying to press, you're going right in there, and you're likely going to bogey every hole, particularly at Pinehurst, because you're just not hitting it that good, and you're just not going to be that precise. But anyway, that same thing happened to me, but mine wasn't as hurtful as this your story is. But carry on. You changed your lines, you went tighter, and that was a big mistake, right?
yeah, like you go out and you try to make birdies. And at that place, like you don't do that. Right. And like to win the US Open, whoever was going to win that day was going to run out of holes. Right. They
Yeah.
weren't going to like do something dramatic and come back and seize the lead and take it. But you were just trying to make pars, and you were going to try to make a couple putts, and you're going to try to make like, if you had a perfect yardage with a perfect angle with a perfect, everything, then you could try to go ahead and do something that, try to make a move. But I tried to do that from bad angles with half shots, but basically you just can't do that there. You have to continue to play your game plan. And I did things that were unnecessary, right? Like the golf course I thought was set up beautifully that day, and it tempted you to do something stupid, and it looked inviting, and you shouldn't do it, but I couldn't help myself because I was trying to make up for previous mistakes, and you just can't do that there. Like I birdied 5, which I'm like, all right, perfect. And I drove in the right rough, just barely in the right rough. And sometimes that's the worst lies you can get. And I hit this 9-iron from like 30 yards longer than I normally hit a 9-iron, whatever that was, right? It landed short and rolled up to like 8 to 10 feet and made it. And I'm like, all right, here we go. Like, let's do this. Like, and then hit the bunker the next hole, and just compound of errors that I knew I didn't need to do. Right. I was probably still in second or third place at that point, and fourth place. Like I just started doing stuff that I knew I shouldn't, and I couldn't help myself. And we were trying to go win because, this was an opportunity of a
You were
lifetime.
so high, the crowd was so high on you, and you wanted to keep it going. And you almost already answered your question, because after all the dust settled, Michael Campbell won by 2 strokes over Tiger Woods. Goosen shot 81, I think, that day. You shot 84, and you staggered out of Pinehurst, kind of almost the way you came in, which was like, man, what happened, right? You came through the gates coming to Pinehurst, not knowing what was going on. You left, and you had all this, Mount Everest of emotions in between, and looking back on it, and you left that tournament, and I knew that was not to avail. You would go on that year, and you won twice on Nationwide that year. You won the Cox Classic up in Omaha, and you won the Pete Dye Classic down in West Virginia 2 times. And then boom, like that, you were back on the PGA Tour, and that's when you and I became friends, and that's all water under the bridge. But I thought it was important. I thought it was fun to think about it now. Here we are all these years later, because it's going to happen to another player. Yeah. And unless you really understand, just in closing, what would you have done different? I mean, yes, you just sort of said it, but in closing summary, what would you have, if you had Sunday all over again today, and you still got that applause on number 1, what would you have done different?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up winning 4 out of the next 7 events. I won 3 times on the Nationwide Tour, got my Battlefield, and then I think I won my 4th start on the PGA Tour. But at night, I'll go back, and I'll just preface this story with, so in 1997, I had a 1-shot lead in NCAAs. Last hole, our team had won. Right, we had a 7-shot Pepperdine, right, and so.
Yeah, and your friend, or our friend Sahith Begala, is a member of my club here at Champions now, and he's our new hero at our club, at Pepperdine grad,
and a great kid, just an awesome human being. But so I had a 1-shot lead. I drove in the bunker, I plugged in the fan, whatever. I chipped it out, and I made double on the last hole to lose NCAAs. And I called our good friend, rest in peace, Eddie Marins, and I said, Mr. Marins, how do I learn from this? And he was so helpful, and we went through like, all right. So I kind of took that same thing, and I ended up making the Walker Cup team that year, and had a great summer of '97 after a disastrous finish at NCAAs. So I wanted to know what I was going to learn from that day, right? Because I knew that no matter what ever happened in my career ever again, I had seen the best of it. Right? If I knew if I was in a last group of a PGA Tour event, well, I was in the last group of a major championship. If I was in the last group of a Korn Ferry Tour event, I was in the last group of a major championship. So, like, I knew that no matter what, I would be prepared for whatever was going to happen again. And I failed, right? I mean, so I went back.
Happens all the time to us, right? Happens to us all the time.
Right? It's managing failures. So I thought about it, and I went back and I said, all right, so here's what I'm going to learn from today. It's still golf, right? You still have a game plan. You can't press. I knew I was hitting it well. I knew I was doing everything, and part of my game was solid, except for my brain that day, right? I tried to do something that I didn't need to do. And
there was no stopping you, right? You were just, there was no, the caddy couldn't have changed your idea. You were going down the wrong track no matter what, right?
No matter what. And like if you looked at Tiger during that era, you saw guys Tiger was always kind of there. Same with Jack. Same with like what Scotty Scheffler's doing now. Like you're seeing, they're just going to stay steady and they're going to let everybody else make mistakes, right? You kind of start to see where players started to melt away when Tiger or Jack were in contention, right? They're like, no, 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 you take it. Like I don't want you take
Yeah.
the trophy. Like so,
I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't stay with you. You go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm gonna. Oh gosh, I just bogeyed 17 to let you take the lead on the 71st hole. I've led for 71 holes, but there's Tiger and Jack, and now Scotty's doing the same. But so I think that's what it was. It's like you go control things that you can control, whether that's in your club championship or whether that's you focus on what the golf course is providing you, what you need to do, what the proper shot is, and never try to do something unnecessary. And that's what I did on Sunday. And those next 4 wins, like I just hung around. I took advantage of when I needed to take advantage of, whether that was a par 5 or a wedge in my hand with a receptive hole location or whatever. Like you do what the golf course is dictating and what your game plan has been set up to do. And that's the one thing I didn't do, and that's the one thing I did coming down the stretch. And I was playing so well at the time that I forgot that, hey, you know what? If I aim away from this hole, I've got 4 more times where I'm going to have a birdie putt. Maybe this isn't the time, right? So,
Well,
like,
as good as you putt. I mean, you putt. I mean, you remind me of David Duval, your stroke and everything. You putt so well. But I think you just gave yourself your game plan for this week, right? You at the beginning of this call, you weren't sure what's going to happen this week, but even so, all the things that happened to you at Pinehurst in 2005, when you walked back into that locker room and you went back to the Corn Ferry, all those players, it wasn't for nothing. All those players knew that you led the U.S. Open through 3 rounds, and they might have done exactly the same thing you did, but they just never got themselves into the lead. So it made you grow as a player, and that's probably accumulated to the 4 wins and what made you today. And that's why you're a part of the history at Pinehurst. And I want to thank you for coming on and talking about it, because it was important to me, and I didn't even know you very well. I was watching that, and I was so aware and so conscious of what you were going through, because I was maybe a couple of years in development, maybe 5 years ahead of you in development. You were as good a player as I was. I mean, it's just the way the cookies crumble. But I never led a U.S. Open, never even been near it. But
well, thank you for saying that, but I was not as good as you were, to be honest. Thanks, bro. But I appreciate it. But no,
well,
you're a legend, my friend, and thank you for even saying that. But no, it's kind of you.
Well, I'm glad you got to tell the 05 story, because it was very important, and there was a couple of pieces in there that I didn't know about, which was also great about well, it wasn't great that you got robbed. It was great what Ron Reed told you in your book about the presentation. You were right there with Tiger, Michael Campbell. That was his greatest win. That was something that was pretty special for New Zealanders. But at any rate, look, you have a great week this week. We're all pulling for you always, as we all were in 2005, and we'll be this week as well.
Thanks, my friend. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It'll be a fun week. It'll be fun to get out and see some old friends and go compete a little bit, no matter what happens. But
and you already told me the game plan, so we're going to check it out with you.
All right, I'll do my best. There's a big difference between thinking and execution.
Don't miss agreeing with it on a par 5 with a 7-iron. That's rule number 1.
Noted. Thanks, man.